By the beginning of 1917, the Russian Empire stretched across 1/6 of the Earth's land surface and governed more than 170 million people. On paper, it remained one of the world's great powers. Yet beneath that immense scale lay mounting pressures that had been building for decades. Devastating war, economic disruption, political unrest, and widespread shortages had pushed the empire toward a breaking point. Within a single year, a monarchy that had ruled for more than 3 centuries would collapse, rival governments would struggle for authority, and revolutionary forces would seize power. The events of 1917 transformed Russia and reshaped the course of the 20th century, setting in motion years of conflict, hardship, and profound social change. The crisis did not emerge suddenly. Long before 1917, the Russian Empire faced significant structural challenges. Although industrialization had expanded rapidly in some cities during the late 19th century, much of the population remained rural and dependent on agriculture. Millions of peasants lived under difficult conditions, and economic inequality remained widespread. Political power was concentrated in the hands of Tsar Nicholas II and the imperial government, while demands for reform grew among workers, intellectuals, and various political movements. The revolution of 1905 had already revealed the fragility of the existing system. Triggered by social unrest, economic hardship, and military defeat in the Russo-Japanese War, protests spread across the empire. The government survived the crisis by granting limited political concessions, including the creation of the State Duma, a representative assembly. However, many reformers believed these measures did not go far enough, while conservatives feared that even limited changes threatened the stability of the monarchy. The outbreak of the First World War in 1914 initially generated a wave of patriotic support. Russia mobilized millions of soldiers and joined the conflict against the Central Powers. Yet the war soon exposed serious weaknesses in the empire's administration, economy, and military infrastructure. Russian forces suffered heavy casualties in major battles, and the demands of total war placed enormous strain on transportation networks and food supplies. By 1916, the situation had deteriorated significantly. Factories struggled to maintain production. Inflation reduced the purchasing power of wages, and shortages became increasingly common in urban centers. Railways, overwhelmed by military requirements, often failed to deliver food and fuel efficiently. While agricultural production continued in many regions, distribution problems left cities facing severe shortages. Public confidence in the government declined as the war dragged on with no clear end in sight. The reputation of the imperial government suffered further from political instability at the highest levels. Nicholas II chose to assume direct command of the army in 1915, linking his personal authority to military outcomes. Meanwhile, domestic affairs in the capital were increasingly associated with controversy and accusations of incompetence. The influence of Grigory Rasputin, a religious figure connected to the imperial family, became a particular source of public criticism. Although many claims made about Rasputin were exaggerated or politically motivated, his presence contributed to growing perceptions that the government had lost control. As winter turned to spring in 1917, tensions reached a critical stage. In Petrograd, the capital city, long bread lines became a visible symbol of broader social frustration. Workers faced shortages, rising prices, and declining living standards. Demonstrations began in late February according to the Julian calendar then used in Russia, corresponding to early March in the modern Gregorian calendar. What started as protests over food shortages quickly expanded into a wider movement. Workers left factories and joined mass demonstrations in the streets. Calls for bread soon merged with demands for political change and an end to the hardships associated with the war. Authorities attempted to restore order, but the situation escalated rapidly. A decisive turning point came when elements of the military stationed in Petrograd refused to suppress the demonstrations. Some soldiers mutinied and joined the protesters instead. The loyalty upon which the monarchy depended began to crumble. Once military support weakened, the government's ability to maintain control diminished dramatically. Faced with an increasingly unmanageable crisis, Nicholas II attempted to return to the capital from military headquarters. Events, however, moved faster than the imperial administration could respond. Political leaders, military commanders, and members of the Duma concluded that the existing government could no longer function effectively. On March 15, 1917, according to the Gregorian calendar, Nicholas II abdicated the throne. His resignation brought an end to more than 3 centuries of Romanov rule. The Russian monarchy, which had survived wars, rebellions, and previous revolutionary challenges, collapsed with remarkable speed. The empire had lost the political center around which it had long been organized. The fall of the monarchy did not resolve Russia's problems. Instead, it created a new and uncertain political landscape. Provisional government emerged from the Duma and assumed formal authority. At the same time, workers' and soldiers' councils known as Soviets exercised influence in many cities. This arrangement produced a situation often described as dual power, in which competing institutions claimed legitimacy and authority. The provisional government inherited an extraordinarily difficult situation. It faced ongoing military commitments, economic instability, social unrest, and growing demands for reform. Many citizens expected rapid improvements in daily life. Yet the government struggled to deliver immediate solutions. One of its most consequential decisions was to continue Russia's participation in the First World War. Leaders feared that withdrawing from the conflict could damage Russia's international standing and create additional instability. However, the war remained deeply unpopular among soldiers and civilians alike. Continued military operations consumed resources while casualties mounted. Throughout the spring and summer of 1917, political divisions intensified. Various groups proposed different visions for Russia's future. Liberals sought constitutional government and gradual reform. Socialists debated competing strategies for social and economic transformation. National movements across the empire pursued greater autonomy or independence. Amid this uncertainty, the Bolsheviks gained increasing attention, led by Vladimir Lenin, who returned to Russia in April 1917. The party argued that the revolution should move beyond limited political reform. Lenin called for the transfer of power to the Soviets and demanded an end to the war. His message appealed to many workers, soldiers, and citizens frustrated by the lack of progress under the provisional government. The summer brought further instability. In July, demonstrations and unrest in Petrograd reflected growing dissatisfaction. Although the Bolsheviks were not yet strong enough to take power, political tensions continued to rise. Government authority appeared increasingly fragile. Another major challenge emerged in August during the Kornilov affair. General Lava Kornilov, commander-in-chief of the Russian army, became involved in a confrontation with the provisional government. Historians continue to debate the precise intentions and misunderstandings surrounding the episode. Nevertheless, the crisis deepened political distrust and further weakened confidence in the government. In the process, the Bolsheviks benefited because they were seen by many supporters as defenders of the revolution against potential authoritarian threats. By autumn, Russia's political environment had become increasingly polarized. Economic problems persisted. Food shortages remained severe in many areas. Industrial production declined, transportation networks struggled, and military morale continued to deteriorate. The provisional government faced mounting criticism from multiple directions, while its capacity to enforce decisions weakened. In October 1917, according to the Julian calendar, then used in Russia, the Bolsheviks moved to seize power. Their leaders concluded that the political moment favored decisive action. Revolutionary forces occupied key locations in Petrograd and challenged the authority of the provisional government. The transfer of power occurred with relatively limited fighting in the capital compared with the much larger conflicts that would follow. The Bolsheviks announced the formation of a new government and declared that political authority now rested with revolutionary institutions. Supporters viewed the event as the fulfillment of revolutionary aspirations while opponents regarded it as an illegitimate seizure of power. The overthrow of the provisional government did not bring immediate stability. Instead, Russia entered a new and even more turbulent phase. The Bolshevik leadership faced enormous challenges, including opposition from rival political movements, economic disruption, and the continuing consequences of war. One of the new government's earliest priorities was addressing Russia's participation in the First World War. Negotiations with the Central Powers resulted in the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk in March 1918. The agreement ended Russia's involvement in the conflict, but required substantial territorial concessions. The treaty generated intense controversy and reflected the difficult choices confronting the revolutionary government. Meanwhile, opposition to Bolshevik rule expanded into a broader civil war. Various anti-Bolshevik forces, often referred to collectively as the White Movement, fought against the new government. Regional conflicts, foreign intervention, and competing political visions contributed to a complex and destructive struggle that lasted for years. The Civil War intensified economic hardship across much of the former empire. Transportation systems suffered severe disruption. Industrial output declined dramatically. Agricultural production fell in many regions due to conflict, instability, labor shortages, and broader economic dislocation. The combination of war, political upheaval, and administrative breakdown created conditions that placed enormous pressure on civilian populations. These developments contributed to one of the most severe humanitarian crises of the era. The Russian famine of 1921-1922 emerged from a combination of factors, including the devastation caused by years of warfare, economic disruption, drought in key agricultural regions, and difficulties in food distribution. Millions of people faced acute shortages. Communities across affected areas struggled to obtain sufficient supplies, and relief efforts became an urgent international concern. Although the famine occurred several years after the revolutions of 1917, its roots were closely connected to the collapse of the old imperial order and the prolonged conflicts that followed. The political transformation that began in 1917 reshaped nearly every aspect of Russian society, but it also unfolded amid extraordinary instability and human hardship. The consequences extended far beyond Russia's borders. The emergence of a revolutionary socialist state altered international politics for decades. Governments around the world closely watched developments in Russia, while revolutionary movements and political parties drew lessons from its experience. The eventual formation of the Soviet Union created a new political and ideological force that would influence global affairs throughout the 20th century. The events of 1917 represented more than the fall of a monarchy. They marked the collapse of an imperial system that had governed a vast and diverse territory for centuries. Long-standing social tensions, the immense pressures of world war, economic disruption, political divisions, and institutional failures converged in a single year of extraordinary upheaval. The result was not a straightforward transition from one stable order to another, but a prolonged period of uncertainty, conflict, and transformation. By the time the turmoil subsided, Russia had been fundamentally altered. The Romanov dynasty was gone. The imperial government had disappeared. New political institutions had emerged from revolution and civil war. Yet the path from empire to revolutionary state carried immense costs and consequences that continued to shape lives long after 1917 ended. The year remains one of the most consequential turning points in modern history, a moment when the collapse of an empire opened the door to a new and profoundly influential chapter in global affairs.